Something's Walking Around My House at Night. Written by Chatturchan. There's a couple of things you need to know. First and foremost, I consider myself an insomniac. Not that I have ever been diagnosed, nor do I have any idea what kind of medical professional I should attend with this kind of suspicion. I just have trouble with falling asleep from time to time. Sometimes it's just a couple of hours. Sometimes I don't sleep for a day or two, but my body eventually adjusts itself back to normal, and the lack of sleep has never been too much of a problem for me to seek help. And before you suggest I resign from coffee or energy drinks, I don't drink any of those. Secondly, I live alone with my mom. That might sound weird coming from a 22-year-old, but I'm still a student, and the whole epidemic situation forced me to go back to my hometown due to online lectures. The stories I'm about to tell you all occurred after I came back, but I can't be 100% certain that it didn't start way earlier. My mom has very light sleep. Despite us living in a flat on the 4th floor, even someone walking around in heels on a pavement outside can wake her up, and when she does, she usually goes to the kitchen, drinks a glass of water, and then goes back to her bedroom. This used to happen almost every night, but since we've ordered a new mattress last summer, she sleeps better and her night trips are rarer. As I mentioned, we live in a flat, and my room just happens to be right opposite the kitchen, and when my mom goes there, she always passes by. Now, since I almost never close my room's door, and I usually spend my sleepless nights browsing social media or watching silly cat videos, I need to avoid getting caught. You know how parents are when they catch you not sleeping at 4 in the morning, and I doubt explaining my sleeping problems would help in any way. So, my trick for years has been to just pretend to be asleep. I can hear my mom's footsteps every time she gets up and walks through the rooms before she sees my phone's faint light, so it's not a problem. I wait for her to drink her cup of coffee, go back to her room, and then pull out my only source of entertainment from under the sheets. The first time I noticed that something was off, she didn't go back to her room. Not for a while, at least. I first assumed that she took her time, maybe looking out the window or something else caught her interest, but after a while I realized that that was not it. As soon as I heard footsteps enter the kitchen, there was a complete and deafening silence. No sound of pouring water, no further footsteps. I even took the risk and looked towards the door, expecting a silhouette standing there, but there was nothing. There was a possibility that she had already turned the corner towards the sink and I simply couldn't see her. But that didn't correspond with what I heard. I began to wonder if I had even heard the footsteps in the first place, or if my lack of sleep had finally took a hit on my perception. But then I heard them again, this time going back. I closed my eyes again, listening for them to move towards my mother's bedroom and fade out, but it took longer than I first anticipated. They were slow, too slow, and felt somehow heavy, as if she was dragging her feet. This could be explained as sleepwalking, but it sounded different. Could it be that she fell asleep as soon as she got to the kitchen and then walked back? Maybe she was sleepwalking to begin with, and in my panicked state of hide the phone before you get caught, I just didn't notice. It's possible, but I don't think I've ever heard my mom sleepwalk before, and I've lived with her for over 20 years. Despite my mixed feelings and suspicions, I didn't think much about the incident and I quickly brushed it off. The next time something unusual happened, footsteps were once again the first thing that I noticed. They were once again slow and much quieter, as if the person making them was purposefully trying not to wake anyone. I don't know if you've ever heard a half-asleep person walking around, but it's never quiet. From my experience, I would say that it's quite the opposite, that they are usually rather loud and irregular. These were not the footsteps of a person that had just woken up. Despite this odd behavior, I still followed my usual strategy. Pretend to be asleep, wait, and sit a couple of more hours before sleep finally comes. I think that I was in the middle of solving a Sudoku puzzle. I don't remember. What I do remember is that this time the footsteps led not to the kitchen, but to the bathroom, which is right next to my room and still requires walking past it. Now, it's not unusual for my mom to go there instead of the kitchen after all. I mean, who doesn't go on a nightly piss from time to time? What was surprising is the fact that after turning the bathroom light on, once again, there was silence. Not the same kind of silence, though. I could still hear things like bare feet slightly moving on the tiled floor, like when you stay in one place for a longer while so that you shift your body weight from one leg to the other. She was just standing there. The source of any sound that I suspected to be my mom just stood there for the rest of the night. Around 6, maybe 7 a.m., as it was getting brighter outside, my mind finally shut down. Until that happened, I'm certain that the light stayed on and nobody left the bathroom or did anything that would make any significant noise. Whoever was standing in that bathroom did not move for a couple of hours. Later that day, after dinner, I confronted my mom, seeking some kind of logical explanation, and she didn't recall going to the bathroom at all. So, did I imagine all of that? Could it have all been a dream that my sleep-deprived brain bestowed upon me? I wish that was the case, I really do. But after that last story, I don't think it is. This happened maybe a month ago. My mother got some free days from work and managed to earn permissions to visit my father abroad. She was gone for 2 weeks and traveled both ways by plane. During that time, I was home alone. I walked outside a couple of times to get the necessary groceries, but other than that, nothing, and no one left or entered the house. And yet, on the last night before my mom came back home, I heard footsteps. In fact, I was woken up by them, despite having a pretty heavy sleep when I actually do get to sleep. Loud thuds were so unnatural, almost inhuman, and my first thought was that someone had broken into the house. I tried to get up and check if I was really in danger, which now that I think about it, was rather foolish of me. I mean, what would I do if a burglar actually made it inside the house? I didn't get to think about that, because the moment I tried to lift my body up, I felt something that could best be described as sleep paralysis. At least, I believe this is what it feels like. I've never experienced it after all. I could open my eyes and look around, but my head remained immobile, as well as the rest of my body. I could barely feel the sheets covering me, and the only thing louder than the steps outside was the sound of blood circulating in my ears. I tried to calm myself, to tell myself that there was no reason to panic, temporarily forgetting about the possible break-in. This will pass, it always does, I thought to myself, recalling multiple sleep paralysis stories that I'd read on the internet. But should I be aware that this is happening to me? This thought occurred to me way later, and at that moment I was still waiting for this state to pass. Suddenly, the steps outside turned more normal, and they sounded like my mom's usual pace when she walks around at night. As they passed my room, whoever was leaving them behind stopped and looked my way. I have no idea how I could tell, but I was certain that I felt someone's gaze on me, despite not being able to tilt my head to actually see. The person turned towards me and walked closer. As they appeared in my line of view, I recognized my mom's face. There are many questions I wish I asked myself right away. For example, why was she in the house? Why did I not hear her unlock the door? How did she see that I was awake in complete darkness? Instead, my brain explained this in the most naive way possible. She must have had an argument with my dad and took an earlier plane home. It was the only explanation I came up with in that short moment as the figure leaned over me. I'm still having trouble fully comprehending what I saw, but it looked like my mom, and at the same time, I swear I've never seen this person before in my life. All the facial features and clothes looked familiar, but the smiling expression that rested on her face was almost alien-like. She stood there for a while, staring at me with a grin. After a few seconds that felt like hours, she came closer and rested her hand on my cheek. It felt cold. Too cold. Like touching a metal surface in the middle of a harsh winter. Then she turned my head to the side, preventing me from seeing anything besides a blank wall in front of my face. And before I knew it, she kissed my cheek with lips as cold as ice. That's the last thing I remember. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. Without a second thought, in my half-awake state, I picked it up and muttered a hello. It was my mom. She was calling from the airport. She had just arrived and is now waiting for her train. I'm sure she said more back then, and I was probably replying accordingly, but my mind went straight up blank. All the questions that I should have asked earlier came to me now, and I just couldn't decide if what happened that night was a dream or not. I know that it sounds crazy. After all, the only possible explanation is that it was all a work of my mind. But at the same time, I don't think that it was. My memory of it feels way too vivid for it to have just been a dream or a hallucination. Call me mental, but at this exact moment of writing this, even now, I still find the option of something unnatural walking around my house in the middle of the night, wearing my mother's skin, more probable than it being just my imagination. Since then, I haven't spotted anyone or anything walking around in the middle of the night again, and I think that it's for the better. I can just hope that the thing that I saw that night left after being seen and decided not to show up again. I really want to believe that, but every night I just can't help but feel that it's waiting for the right moment to strike, and there is nothing I can do to stop it. All I can do is just pray to some higher power that next time that I hear the footsteps in the middle of the night, it won't know that I'm awake.